Hello, today we are going to be looking at some of the parallel shots used in Bo Burnham's Inside. So I am a fairly new Bo Burnham fan. I am ashamed to say I did not know that he existed prior to discovering Inside through a reaction video on YouTube. I had heard sort of the premise of Inside, that it was something that Bo created completely by himself in one room over the course of a year during the pandemic. And I was very intrigued by that and by the fact that it was a comedy. And I had heard the very beginning of Inside and decided that it was something that I needed to watch in its entirety, and immediately fell in love with it and have kind of gone down the rabbit hole of Bo Burnham's work ever since. I am not a film expert. I have not studied film formally at all, but I am part of a film club that is run by a man who teaches film and theater for a living. And so we sort of watch films together and analyze the way that things like the cinematography, the lighting, and the camera angles and all of that help to create deeper levels of meaning in the work. And so when I first watched Inside, I was watching it sort of through that lens. And one of the things, as I have continued to rewatch it, one of the things that has really stuck out to me is the way that he uses parallel shots to create connections and cohesion between different parts of the special, especially the beginning and the end. So I'm going to show you some different examples of what I'm talking about. So one way that Bo uses parallel shots in Inside is to foreshadow or recall things for the audience. One example of this is during the camera and lighting tests at the beginning. This is one of the shots of him as he's testing out the camera for the special. And this shot actually pops up again during the part where he is introducing the song 30. It's a really quick flashback. He's talking about how he's now been working on the special for 6 months. And as he says that, this picture pops up on the screen, sort of, hey, remember how I looked at the beginning of the special? Remember where we started and where we've come to now? And turns out it's only halfway through the special. But he uses this shot, again, to remind the audience where they started and where they've come to up until that point. And when you see them side by side, it's clearly the same shot. He just uses it twice for that purpose. Another time that he does this is actually as a flash forward during the camera and lighting test. We see this image pop up very quickly on the screen. If you blink, you'll miss it. And it's sort of a preview, a prophecy of sorts of where the special is headed, where we're going to end up. And by the time we get to the end of the special, towards the end, after he's done All Eyes on Me and has like an editing sequence before he goes into the final song, Goodbye, he says that he thinks he's done with the special, and we get this shot, which, when you look at them side by side, it's very clear that they're related, right? That this shot on the right is where us finally getting to that point in the special that he previewed in the shot on the left at the beginning. Another way that Bo uses parallel shots is to link scenes thematically, and the best example of this is the ending of FaceTime with My Mom and the ending of Sexting. So this shot from the end of FaceTime with My Mom shows after the screen of his phone has gone dark, we are left with Bo sitting in the room by himself, and he sighs and puts his head in his hands, and the screen kind of goes to black. This very similar ending is also used at the end of Sexting. At the end of this song, Bo also turns off his screen on his phone. It goes to black, and we are left with him sitting sort of hunched over with his head in his hand in the dark, just as it happened at the end of FaceTime with My Mom. Now, this is a pretty common way, kind of going to black is a common way to end a scene, but because these two songs are also connected thematically, I think that's one of the reasons why he chose to end them in a similar way. So, both of these songs really are about the fact that even though technology was great, it made us able to connect with our loved ones during the pandemic when we couldn't be with them in person. Um, as great as that is, at the end of the day, the technology is always going to leave us empty and feeling lonely. No technology can ever fully replicate what it is like to be physically present with your loved one, whether it's your mom or your significant other. Nothing is going to be able to replicate that experience of being with them in the flesh, face to face. Another kind of side note, I do like the fact that they are also both blue in color and that Bo chose to end sexting with this specific background, which earlier in the song, was making us giggle like immature middle schoolers. But by the end, in this context, as he's singing about another night, stuck in my home, sitting alone, in this context, they are more reminiscent of tears. And so I like how he is able to use the exact same background, the same image, to create two completely different emotions within the same song just based on their context. The final way, and my favorite way, that Bo uses parallel shots in Inside is to create contrast. And he does this multiple times. One of the most obvious is in the opening shot, which, if you're not familiar with Bo's other work other than Inside, you may not know that the opening shot of Inside is actually a mirror image of the closing shot of Make Happy, which was his previous special from 5 years earlier. That special ended with Bo in this same room, because it's his own property. It ends with him sitting in this room playing a song on the piano about trying to find happiness. And he gets up and he walks out of the dark room into the brilliant sunlight, across the lawn to his girlfriend and their dog who are waiting for him. And I think at this point he probably knew he was going to be walking away from comedy, but even without that context, the message is clear that he's walking out of the darkness into the light towards the things that he loves the most that will hopefully help him find happiness. Well, Inside opens in the exact mirror image way, with him walking out of the brilliant sunlight into the dark room, closing the door behind him, locking himself inside in the dark. Uh, but this opening shot is also paralleled and mirrored later at the end of the special. So in the opening, the light slowly comes up on the dark room, the door starts to crack open, and Bo enters the room. After the song Goodbye, at the end of the special, we have a similar shot of him sitting in the dark, and the door starts to open again to the light outside. When we look at these shots side by side, it's clear that they're connected, but we can also use them to contrast. So the one major difference between these two shots, other than the fact that Bo is in the room in the second one, is that the keyboard is missing, right? Both have the chair, the desk is there. It's hard to tell because it's dark, but I think the dresser is still there in both of them. The main difference is that the keyboard is missing, which is important because throughout this whole special, the creative process, the act of making this thing, is what is getting Bo through this difficult time in his life and in the world. And in this final shot, he is without that. That creative process has been stripped away, and he is just left sitting alone in the dark. He's kind of given up. He's wallowing. He's not trying to get out of the room. The door just kind of opens of its own accord. And so these two shots kind of compare and contrast where we started and where we've ended up. And they also have the same music at the same time. If you've seen it a bunch of times, you're probably familiar with that kind of ethereal ringing noise that plays in the background of both of these shots that again clearly connect them to each other. Another place where he uses parallel shots to compare and contrast the beginning and the end of the special is with the mirror shots. So this one is from the introduction to the special, where he's literally welcoming us and telling us why he decided to make this thing, that it's a way to distract him from what's happening. It's a way he hopes to give us some joy and distraction from what's going on in the world. And this is how he kicks off the special. It's the first time we hear him talk, not in a song. Much later in the special, in the scene that's kind of the editing sequence before he goes into the final song of Goodbye. So the first one is right after the opening song, and this one is right before the closing song. We see this mirror shot again, but this time there are some differences. As you can see, the room is much more cluttered in the second shot. He's dressed the same, like the white t-shirt, but and I think jeans as well. But in the second shot, his shirt is more wrinkly and it's kind of dingier looking in color. Clearly, his face and his hair has, changed and gotten more disheveled. In the first one, he's clearly articulating, again, kind of his thesis statement for the special. In the second one, he doesn't have any words at all. He literally kind of looks at the camera, sighs, rubs his face like he's really tired, and turns the camera off. So these two shots clearly evoking each other and showing the distinction of where he started and where he's ended up. Another shot that repeats itself from, again, similar time periods in the special is the being sucked into the camera shot. So the first one happens as a transition into the song Comedy. We have the whole lighting sequence, lighting and testing cameras and stuff like that. And then we get sucked into the camera until the screen is black, and then the song Comedy starts. The same shot is repeated much later in the special, and it's used as a transition this time into the song All Eyes on Me. It's after he's had sort of a breakdown and he's sobbing, and the camera zooms into the lens as All Eyes on Me starts to play in the background. This time, as you can see, it's very blurry and out of focus. This is especially clear when we compare these two shots. Part of that is practically speaking, it had to be blurry because in the shot on the right, it started much more zoomed out with Bo as the focal point, and then zooms in past him into the camera. And because he's filming by himself, he doesn't have a camera crew, and he's doing all the zooming in the editing process after the fact, he can't change the focus of the camera while he's in the process of filming and acting, right? Especially in a scene where he's sobbing and things, he can't adjust the focus. So practically speaking, it had to be blurry, but I think it's also evocative of the fact that at the beginning it is much more clear, there's a purpose, there's a clear direction and a focus, and by the end his mental state is more fuzzy and blurry, and he sort of lost his direction and his focus and forgot kind of where he was going and why he was doing this in the first place. So the final two examples are my favorite and are ones that it really took me watching the special many times before I noticed that they were specifically connected. So we have this shot from the beginning of Comedy. It's the first, full-length song. He's singing about how the world is going crazy and he feels like he wants to do something to make a difference. And his conclusion is that he's going to heal the world with his comedy, right? This shot is very directly referenced at the end of the special, at the end of the song Goodbye in this shot. And as you can see, it's very different, this shot. when you look at them side by side, it's very clear that they're referencing each other, but they're very different. So in the first shot, the spotlight is on him, and it's a good thing. He actually turns on the spotlight himself. He clicks the button, turns it on, and starts performing. And the spotlight is a good thing. In fact, he wants the attention, and he plays a laugh track because there's no audience to laugh at him, right, at his jokes. And so the attention in the first shot is a good thing. By the last shot, it is not a good thing. This time, he does not turn the light on himself. He is singing his song goodbye and all of a sudden finds himself blinded in the spotlight as people are singing, come out with your hands up, we've got you surrounded. So it's very different. This time it is unwanted attention. In the first one, the room is fairly clean. In the second one, the room is much more cluttered. In the first one, it seemed like he was being vulnerable and kind of, bearing his soul to us, explaining the emotions that he was having during this difficult time. But that was nowhere near the level of vulnerability that he would get to later in the special. By this final shot, he has completely bared himself to us, right? He has bared his soul. He is completely exposed and vulnerable. And we really feel that in his posture, in his nakedness, of course. His hair and beard are at their full length. And it's just a really stark contrast between the two. My final and probably favorite parallel shot, I'm actually going to start with the one from later in the special. So in this shot, it is as he's sort of kind of having a mental breakdown leading into All Eyes on Me. He's trying to tell us that it has been a year since he started working on this project, and he just can't get the words out. He can't phrase it the way he wants. He gets really frustrated and eventually is just like, screw it, gives up, drops the microphone, storms off, pushing things into the mirror, and just, yeah, storms off. And then we see him sobbing in the next shot. And I've seen several content creators on YouTube and things talk about how this felt very real to them. It was really reminiscent of the way that the creative process goes for them sometimes as they're trying to create videos, with the starting and stopping and having to do take after take to get it right and being frustrated. And I've heard people speculate that could this shot possibly have been real, like a real raw take of something that happened, that he just decided to leave in the final cut to show those raw emotions. And while I feel like he probably did experience those very real emotions, in my personal opinion, this shot and this scene is 100% scripted, very purposefully planned and composed. And one of the reasons I think that is because this shot, with the background being what it is a direct reference to a shot earlier in the special. Bo uses the projector a lot in a lot of different ways throughout the special, but there are two times when he just has just a background on it while he's talking, and it's the same background, and that is in this shot and this next shot. This shot from the beginning of the special, when the first time that he sings about healing the world with his comedy. He uses the exact same background, but it is a very, very different shot. So like the last example, when we see them side by side, we can see the difference, right? In the first shot, he has just stood up and he is at his full 6'6". The camera angle is kind of low, almost pointed up at him, which makes him look even taller. He is dominating the screen, taking up the majority of the space. The room is very clean, it's clear, it's an unobstructed view. He is very clearly articulating what he is setting out to do, which is healing the world with his comedy. He's very confident. In the second shot, it could not be more different, right? The camera is further back. There's things like the doorway, the way the wall is, the lighting and sound equipment and things that are literally acting as obstacles, acting as a barrier between him and the audience. He is much smaller in the frame because we're further back and because he is seated, and not only seated, but hunched over, hooded. Is just a very different feel to it. And in this one, he's not articulate. In fact, he can't even get a complete sentence out the way he wants it. I think the implication being that if he set out, if his thesis statement, his sort of goal with the special, even though it's tongue in cheek, is to heal the world with his comedy, how can he do that when he can't even make himself happy with his comedy, right? Which could be kind of a reference almost back to Can't Handle This in the Kanye rant with the, attempting to give us, the audience, something that it turns out he can't even give himself. And I think that song, specifically the Kanye rant and the end of Make Happy, obviously very connected with Inside cinematographically in the way that it's shot, but also thematically connected as well. And so if that was his goal, he's now failing. And I think that's a really important, thing to convey at this point in the special. So those were just some of the examples of the shots that he uses that are parallels of each other in the special. And I'm sure if you've watched Inside as many times as I have, you could probably think of more of them. So feel free to let me know if I missed any. But I really do just love the way that he uses the beginning of the special up through like that introduction after comedy, and then from again kind of that breakdown point, especially after All Eyes on Me to the end, they really do mirror each other really brilliantly. And now that we've seen the Inside outtakes and we know kind of how chaotic it was and how many different ways he tried things before he got it the way he wanted it to, I think it's even more impressive that he was able to kind of trim out the fat and make an ending that so like perfectly is a bookend with the beginning to make it a cohesive, comprehensive, polished final product for us. And the way that he was able to do that is just so impressive to me, and probably, if you're a Bo Burnham fan, to you as well. So thank you for taking time to watch this. Feel free to share with me, again, anything I might have missed or any of your favorite things that Bo does with his cinematography in Inside or in his other specials or his other film work as well, Eighth Grade, or really, yeah, any of the other filmmaking things that you notice from him that you love and want to share. I would love to hear about them. But otherwise, I will end it there. And as Bo would say, thanks for watching.